What happens when the world's second-largest economy stops playing nice? In 2025, the US-China trade war has gone nuclear, and American corporations are paying the price. From skyrocketing tariffs to sudden export bans, China's withdrawal from the US market is triggering a corporate collapse unlike anything we've seen in decades. Supply chains are broken, sales are vanishing, entire industries are on the brink. And we're not talking about small startups. We're talking about Tesla, Apple, Walmart, Boeing, the very foundations of the US economy. In this video, we're counting down the top 10 American companies collapsing under the pressure of a fractured global relationship. Why are they falling? Can they recover? And what does it mean for the future of American power? Stick around, this list might just be a preview of what's next for the US economy. Number 10, General Motors. At one point, General Motors wasn't just the biggest car company in the US, it was the very symbol of American industrial strength. But that symbol is now cracking. China accounted for more than 2.5 million vehicle sales for GM annually, nearly 40% of its global volume. It was the company's largest and most profitable market outside the United States. But with the recent collapse in US-China trade relations, Beijing has turned off the faucet. Tariffs, sanctions, and regulatory hurdles have made it virtually impossible for GM to sell or even manufacture in China. Add to that a supply chain nightmare, countless parts, electrical systems, semiconductors, precision components previously sourced from China are now inaccessible. Assembly lines in Michigan, Ohio, and Missouri have slowed to a crawl, some have shut down completely. Thousands of union jobs lost overnight, plants idle, communities devastated. In places like Lansing and Flint, this feels eerily like the Great Recession all over again. Dealerships are full, but not with customers. They're full of unsold inventory and growing frustration. Even loyal GM buyers are turning elsewhere as price hikes and vehicle shortages stretch on. To make matters worse, Chinese automakers, once partners, are now aggressive global competitors, pushing into electric vehicle markets in Europe, Africa, and Latin America. GM's future hinges on its EV strategy, but without Chinese battery components, even that path is shaky. The company that once declared, "What's good for GM is good for America," is now on the defensive, laying off workers and lobbying Washington for relief. Can GM survive without China? Maybe. But one thing is clear, its golden age is over, and what comes next may not be survival. It may be reinvention or extinction. Number 9. Caterpillar. For decades, Caterpillar has been the backbone of America's construction and infrastructure industries. Its iconic yellow machines built highways, railroads, and cities, not just in the US but around the world. But now the giant is stumbling, and China's withdrawal is a key reason why. Caterpillar relied heavily on Chinese steel, aluminum, and precision parts to keep production running. With the US-China trade collapse, that pipeline has shut down. Steel prices in the US have skyrocketed. Specialized components once delivered within days are now stuck in bureaucratic limbo or unavailable entirely. Factories in Peoria, Illinois, once humming with life, are seeing rolling layoffs, shortened shifts, and stalled production. Warehouses sit half-empty, and new orders are delayed by weeks, sometimes months. But it's not just parts that are missing, it's market share. Caterpillar once had a dominant foothold in Asia, but with rising nationalism and Beijing's preference for local brands like XCMG and Sany, contracts are drying up. International projects, especially in Africa and the Middle East, are now favoring European and Chinese manufacturers with faster supply chains and fewer political entanglements. Meanwhile, US contractors are turning to used equipment or smaller, cheaper competitors because they simply can't afford to wait. Wall Street is noticing. Caterpillar's stock has dipped sharply, investor confidence is rattled, and projections for the next 12 months are grim. Even infrastructure projects backed by federal funding are being delayed, not because of money but because machines aren't ready. For a company that once represented industrial certainty, Caterpillar is now fighting an uphill battle just to stay competitive. If the supply chain crisis continues and China remains off limits, Caterpillar may not collapse completely, but it won't lead the future either. The machine isn't broken, but it's definitely losing momentum. Number 8. John Deere. For over 180 years, John Deere has been the face of American farming. Its green and yellow tractors are as iconic as the fields they help cultivate. But now, this agricultural titan is facing its toughest season yet, and the root of the crisis leads straight to China. John Deere depended heavily on Chinese suppliers for precision electronics, sensors, hydraulics, and engine components. When the trade war escalated and China cut off exports, the company's finely tuned supply chain began to crack. Assembly lines in Illinois, Iowa, and Kansas slowed to a crawl. Some plants were forced to halt production entirely, leading to mass furloughs and regional economic strain. But that's only half the story. China wasn't just a supplier, it was also a critical buyer. For years, China was one of the top importers of American soybeans, corn, and grain. When tensions rose, China responded by slashing agricultural imports from the US, sending crop prices into freefall. With commodity prices crashing, farmers across the Midwest hit pause on big equipment purchases. No demand means no sales, and for John Deere, that meant millions in backlogged inventory, shrinking revenue, and widespread layoffs. Used equipment sales surged, new machine orders disappeared. Smaller competitors and foreign brands are creeping into market share once dominated by Deere. To survive, the company has tried pivoting toward automation and tech, but chip shortages and R&D cuts, also tied to Chinese restrictions, are slowing those efforts down. John Deere isn't just dealing with a business slowdown, it's facing an existential threat. When farmers suffer, John Deere suffers, and right now the Farm Belt is bleeding, and Deere is right in the middle of it. If the China standoff doesn't ease soon, this cornerstone of American agriculture may be forced to downsize into survival mode. Number 7. Best Buy. Best Buy was once America's go-to destination for everything tech, from smartphones to smart TVs, laptops to gaming consoles. It dominated the electronics retail space like no one else. But in 2025, that dominance is fading fast. Why? Because Best Buy was built on China's supply chain, and that supply chain just collapsed. Over 60% of Best Buy's inventory, from televisions to phone chargers, was sourced directly or indirectly from Chinese manufacturers. With the trade war boiling over and China pulling out, shipments dried up almost overnight. The result? Empty shelves, delayed restocks, and price hikes that sent loyal customers fleeing to online platforms and discount retailers. Flagship stores in cities like Chicago, Phoenix, and Miami are now struggling to justify their overhead, with foot traffic down more than 40%. The once trusted Geek Squad has seen massive layoffs as fewer devices are sold and even fewer repairs come in. And the hits keep coming. Big brands like Lenovo, Huawei, and even certain LG and Samsung divisions have either restricted exports to the US or increased prices dramatically due to part shortages. Best Buy simply can't compete. Its business model, high-volume tech sales with low margins, only works when inventory is reliable and affordable. Now, with warehouses understaffed and supplier relationships fractured, the company is hemorrhaging revenue. Investors are panicking, stock prices are tumbling, and the few stores still open are downsizing. Less space, less staff, and far fewer customers. Once hailed as a rare retail survivor in the age of Amazon, Best Buy is now on life support. And unless it can completely reinvent its sourcing strategy or forge new supplier networks fast, its collapse may be just one fiscal quarter away, because in a world without China, Best Buy may no longer have anything left to sell. Number 6. Boeing. Boeing has long been a symbol of American engineering, building the planes that move people, power militaries, and connect economies. But in the wake of the US-China breakdown, that symbol is showing cracks, and fast. For years, China was Boeing's second largest customer, accounting for nearly 15% of total commercial aircraft sales. Orders from Chinese airlines like Air China, China Southern, and Hainan Airlines fueled Boeing's growth even during turbulent times, but not anymore. In 2025, Beijing announced a complete halt to all Boeing aircraft orders, citing national security and supply chain unreliability. That translated to $15 billion in annual revenue gone overnight. But it gets worse. Boeing also relied on Chinese manufacturing facilities, particularly in Shenyang, where critical parts for the 737 and 787 were produced. With that supply chain severed, assembly lines in Seattle and Charleston slowed dramatically. Thousands of workers were furloughed, others permanently laid off. The ripple effects hit hard in local economies, from suppliers to logistics companies to the small diners near the plants. Meanwhile, Airbus, Boeing's European rival, wasted no time. It swooped into Asia, signing multi-billion-dollar deals with China, India, and Southeast Asian nations, further pushing Boeing out of global contention. Back in the US, Boeing scrambled to stabilize. It appealed to Congress for emergency defense contracts, announced aggressive cost-cutting, and sought new partnerships outside Asia. But confidence was already shaken. Airlines delayed existing Boeing orders, worried about delivery timelines and parts shortages. Wall Street responded with a sharp sell-off, and Boeing's once-prized stock took a nosedive. For a company that helped define 20th century American power, Boeing now faces a very 21st century reality. Global trade is fragile, trust is currency, and without China, even giants can fall. Unless Boeing can rebuild its supply chain and reclaim market trust, it may never fly as high again. Number 5. Nike. For decades, Nike wasn't just a sportswear brand, it was a global cultural force. But now, the company that told the world to just do it is struggling to just hold on. Why? Because China was both Nike's factory floor and one of its biggest customers. Roughly 35% of Nike's global production, including footwear, apparel, and accessories, came from Chinese factories. And China accounted for more than $4 billion in annual sales, making it one of Nike's top 3 consumer markets. When Beijing cut ties in response to US tariffs and political pressure, both ends of Nike's business collapsed. On the production side, manufacturing delays turned into shutdowns. Sneaker launches were postponed, apparel lines went unfinished, warehouses in the US began running low, and shipments stalled at ports. Meanwhile, the consumer side took a direct hit. Nike's flagship stores in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou closed permanently. Chinese influencers cut ties and local customers shifted to domestic brands like Anta and Li Ning, which saw a patriotic boost in sales. Back home, Nike tried to pivot, moving some manufacturing to Vietnam, India, and Mexico. But cost increases and slower production meant higher prices for US consumers. Suddenly, that $110 pair of Air Force Ones was going for $150, and not selling. Layoffs followed. Thousands of corporate and retail employees were let go across North America and Europe. Nike's stock dipped sharply, and Wall Street analysts began questioning its future growth. Without access to Asia, what was once a symbol of cool, fast, and global now feels sluggish, expensive, and out of step. Unless Nike can rebuild its supply chains, win back lost markets, and adapt to a post-China reality, it may go from trendsetter to turnaround case. Because without China, even a brand like Nike can lose its footing. Number 4. Intel. For decades, Intel powered the digital revolution. Its chips ran the world's laptops, servers, and enterprise infrastructure. But in 2025, that silicon strength is cracking, and China is the fault line. Intel's reliance on Chinese suppliers for rare earth minerals, specialized components, and manufacturing equipment wasn't a minor dependency, it was foundational. When China enacted export bans and blocked technology cooperation, Intel's production timelines fell apart. Plants in Arizona, Oregon, and New Mexico reported component shortages, R&D delays, and reduced output. And it didn't stop there. Major clients like Dell, HP, and Lenovo, facing uncertainty in chip availability, began shifting to competitors like AMD, Qualcomm, and Taiwan's TSMC, whose Asia-based supply lines remained more stable. Suddenly, Intel wasn't the go-to chipmaker, it was a risk factor. Even Intel's high-stakes plan to reclaim leadership in advanced semiconductors took a hit. Its $20 billion expansion into domestic chip fabrication, partly supported by the CHIPS Act, stalled as specialized Chinese tooling and process equipment became unavailable. R&D labs began cutting staff, partner universities saw projects shelved, and the talent brain drain accelerated with engineers defecting to more nimble, diversified rivals. China was also a key consumer market. Losing access meant billions in lost revenue from cloud service providers, data centers, and local device makers. Meanwhile, Chinese firms like Huawei, SAIC, and Zaxxon gained ground, filling the void and moving further toward tech independence. Intel is now caught in a painful squeeze, too dependent on global cooperation to go fully domestic, too slow to adapt in a fast-moving sector. The company that once defined Moore's Law is now struggling to define its place in the new tech order. Without a breakthrough or global realignment, Intel risks going from industry leader to legacy player. Because when your foundation is built on China, and China walks away, even giants can fall. Number 3. Apple. For years, Apple was the undisputed king of global innovation. But in 2025, that crown is slipping, and the culprit is clear China. Apple's success has long been tied to its vast and intricate Chinese supply chain, with Foxconn's massive factories in Zhengzhou, Shenzhen and Chengdu assembling over 90% of the world's iPhones. When trade tensions escalated and China pulled the plug, Apple's engine stalled almost overnight. iPhone production plummeted, new models were delayed by months, and retailers across the US reported empty shelves and frustrated customers, especially during the critical back-to-school and holiday seasons. And it wasn't just hardware. Apple lost access to a $74 billion consumer market in China, where it once dominated high-end smartphone sales. Government restrictions and nationalist campaigns turned Chinese consumers toward domestic brands like Huawei, Xiaomi, and Honor. Flagship Apple stores in Beijing, Shanghai, and Chengdu were quietly shuttered. Meanwhile, Apple's attempts to shift production to Vietnam, India, and Mexico faced infrastructure gaps and slower output. Costs surged, margins shrank, and the once unstoppable tech giant began laying off engineers, canceling supplier contracts, and issuing revenue warnings to investors. The App Store also took a hit, losing millions in fees from Chinese developers who now build for alternative platforms. Apple's brand, once a symbol of luxury and simplicity, now feels vulnerable. Samsung, Google, and even emerging players like Nothing are seizing market share in the US and abroad. The fall isn't total, but it's visible. Apple remains powerful, but its reliance on China left it exposed, unprepared, and scrambling to adapt in a post-China era. Apple must reinvent its supply chain, reconnect with global markets, and re-earn the trust of users who now see that even the world's most valuable company isn't immune to collapse. Because when China disconnects, the world's most iconic brand bleeds. Number 2. Walmart. For millions of Americans, Walmart is more than just a store, it's a lifeline. From groceries and electronics to clothes and medicine, it's the place where everyday life happens. But in 2025, that convenience is crumbling fast. Why? Because Walmart's empire was built on China. Over 70% of Walmart's consumer goods, including toys, appliances, clothing, and electronics, came directly or indirectly from Chinese factories. When China pulled out in retaliation to escalating US trade policies, Walmart shelves went empty almost overnight. Shipments stopped, inventories vanished, and prices soared. Rural stores across Arkansas, Ohio, Texas, and Mississippi, places with few other retail options, were hit hardest. Customers walked into half-stocked aisles and left frustrated. Small towns began seeing store closures for the first time in decades, sparking economic ripple effects in already struggling communities. Layoffs spread across logistics centers, regional warehouses, and frontline retail positions. The company's always low prices promise was broken. Shoppers turned to Costco, Target, and Amazon, where supply chains proved slightly more diversified. Walmart tried to pivot, fast-tracking domestic supplier deals and expanding imports from Vietnam, India, and Latin America. But the adjustment was slow and costly, and with shrinking margins, the company couldn't absorb the impact. Wall Street noticed. Walmart stocks slipped as quarterly reports missed expectations and future guidance turned bleak. Behind the scenes, executives scrambled to rewire a global network that took decades to build and collapsed in months. Walmart's identity, efficiency, affordability, ubiquity, now feels outdated in a fractured global economy. The company may survive, but it will never be the same. Because when your model depends on global abundance and that abundance disappears, even giants stumble. And in this case, Main Street America is feeling every tremor. Tesla was once the crown jewel of American innovation, a company that didn't just disrupt the auto industry, it redefined it. But in 2025, that electric momentum is short-circuiting, and China is at the heart of the collapse. Tesla's Gigafactory in Shanghai was its most productive plant, responsible for nearly half of its global output, including the Model 3 and Model Y. It wasn't just a factory, it was a gateway to the largest electric vehicle market in the world. Then came the fallout, Amid rising tariffs, political backlash, and tightened restrictions, China ordered Tesla to cease operations in Shanghai and revoked its ability to sell directly to Chinese consumers. Overnight, Tesla lost millions of vehicles in annual production capacity and access to a market that represented more than 30% of its global revenue. But the real hit came behind the scenes. Tesla's battery supply chain, including lithium, cobalt, and rare earth metals sourced from and refined in China, fell apart. Without it, production in Fremont, California and Nevada's gigafactory slowed dramatically. Layoffs mounted, delivery delays grew, and stock prices dipped. Elon Musk, once a symbol of invincibility, went unusually quiet. Meanwhile, Chinese EV giants like BYD, XPeng, and NIO surged forward, filling Tesla's void in Asia and even entering European markets aggressively. Back in the US, Tesla tried to shift sourcing to South America and Australia, but infrastructure and political red tape slowed progress. The company's once flawless reputation for speed and scalability cracked under pressure. Analysts downgraded the stock, consumer confidence wavered, and while Tesla remains a powerhouse, its aura of inevitability is gone. Because when your growth depends on a country that no longer welcomes you, you don't just lose market share, you lose momentum. Tesla didn't crash, it lost traction, and in a race this competitive, that might be all it takes to fall behind. These companies weren't just brands, they were pillars of American dominance. Now they're collapsing under the weight of a broken global relationship. As China pulls back and supply chains unravel, the question isn't just who's next, it's what happens to us all. Will American innovation rise again, or is this the beginning of a long decline? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and if you found this video eye-opening, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell because the next collapse might already be happening, and you deserve to see it coming. Thank you everyone for watching. If you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. See you next time. What triggered China's pullout? Which companies are hit hardest? Could this signal the beginning of a US economic collapse? Stay with us as we break down the facts, uncover hidden impacts, and explore what this shift could mean for America's financial future.